Okay, so in today's video we are going to talk about architecture of Appium. But before we start with the architecture of Appium, let's understand the architecture of Selenium Webdriver, and then we will move to the architecture of Appium and how the Appium is connected to the Selenium, how Appium is different than Selenium, in which aspects it is different and in which aspects it is same. So we will discuss about those points then. Right, so this is the diagram of Selenium WebDriver. Right, here we have a Selenium APIs that the WebDriver comes with the two main components, Selenium libraries and the browser drivers. Okay, so Selenium libraries allow us to write our Selenium tests in different languages like C#, Java, Python, Ruby, and many other. Right, so this is what the Selenium client libraries are. Now these libraries provides us with different APIs to find the elements for any UI automation tool. Finding an element. Let's say this is the element, this is the page. So here on this page, I want to, as my UI automation test, I want to type inside this element. So for any UI automation tool, it becomes necessary to find this UI control on the screen, and then it can perform the required interaction, right? So Selenium APIs gives us, like Selenium libraries gives us different APIs to identify the elements with different techniques, as well as there are in those APIs, in those libraries, there are APIs to perform different interactions as well, typing, clicking, selecting and all, right? So which we usually require in any UI automation test, right? So these libraries are made available in different programming languages. Now we write our scripts using these library functions in our in any programming language of our choice. So these libraries, these APIs, what we call, they go to the browser drivers for the translation, right? As we want to automate the browsers, right, and the application running inside the browser. So every browser exposes a UI automation API, right? So the drivers, what they do is, like Chrome driver, what it does, so whatever the, say, send keys I have called in my Selenium test, so that send keys, that Chrome driver translates into the Chrome's native UI automation API call, and then the application under test gets interacted with, right? This is the concept of Selenium. So WebDriver comes with the different browser drivers, Gecko driver, Chrome driver, then Edge driver. So all these browser specific drivers, they are simply responsible for translating Selenium client APIs into the required browser's native UI automation API calls. Now having said this, Selenium, as the WebDriver, it only comes with the browser drivers. So we can only automate the browser applications or web applications, the applications interface of which can be executed inside the browser, right? So these are called web applications or websites which runs inside the browser. So now with this architecture, as we have understood, so every Selenium API call would be translated by the respective browser driver into that browser's native UI automation API calls. So our scope limits only to the browser and the application running inside the browser for that matter. But if I have any other application which is, say, native application, which is, say, for example, this calculator app. Now this calculator application, okay, this calculator application, the interface is designed using the native interface design technologies like WinForm, C#, WPF. There are many software SDKs, software development kits, which comes with the libraries to design the different platform based applications. So Windows has many SDKs, WinForms and Windows SDK and many other WPF and all. Say if we talk about the mobile applications, mobile platforms, Android, iOS. So these platforms also comes with Android SDK, iOS SDK. So iOS SDK is a set of libraries to design iOS native applications. Android SDK comes with the set of libraries to design Android applications. So if we talk about such applications, native applications, whether they are desktop or mobile, it doesn't matter, but they are the native apps. So now if I want to automate a native app, so Selenium was not a solution, right? Why? Because the Selenium was having the browser drivers, only those drivers which can translate Selenium APIs into the browser's native automation API calls, right? Hence, whatever can be executed inside the browser can be interacted with the help of Selenium APIs. But what about the native apps now? Like mobile native apps, desktop native apps? Selenium was not a solution, right? So the solutions were in UFT, Test Complete, Ranorex, and many other tools are there which supports native application automation. So people used to use Selenium for website automation, but if they have any native apps, they have to go for, and they have to leave the Selenium environment, and they have to go for something else like UFT or Test Complete or Ranorex and all. Now, then Selenium decided to extend their support now from web to the native context, right? And that is where the Appium came into picture. Appium. So what Appium did? So Appium actually helped in extending the Selenium API support from web context to the native context. Now let's understand how it is done. So every software development kit like SDK, which allows you to design the particular platform app, it comes with the UI automation tool, a library as well. Not a tool, we cannot say a tool, but library, a UI automation library, which developers uses for doing the component testing. So let's say as a developer, if I have built this component having the UI and all, and I want to get some component testing done like the UI through the UI itself, so I will make use of that UI automation library, and the component testing would be a part of my build life cycle, right? That way. So these platforms like these SDKs, they come with the UI automation libraries as well. So Android, if we talk about Android, so Android SDK, along with having the libraries to design Android's native app, it also contains a UI automator framework, which is a UI automation framework for automating the Android applications, right? iOS SDK comes with a XCUI test framework, which is a automation framework which comes along with the SDK, so using which I can automate any iOS interface, right? And Microsoft also gives us the Microsoft UI automation library, using which we can automate any Microsoft SDK designed interface. Now, if I have a native app, and that too on a different platforms, the same application I want to test, let's say this calculator. So this is, I am testing on this Windows desktop, Android, iOS calculator also I want to test. So the designs are being done in 3 different SDKs. So this interface is designed using Windows SDK. The other Android calculators interface is designed using Android SDK, and iOS calculator is designed using iOS SDK. Now if I want to automate my tests on this, then for Microsoft calculator, the Windows calculator, I need to use Microsoft UI automation library. For Android, I need to use UI automator, Android UI automator framework library. and for iOS it is XUI test framework library, right? So 3 different UI automation libraries I need to use, and the development of the test would also be in 3 different languages. Like for Microsoft UI automation library to use it, I need to write my scripts in C#. For Android, for using UI Automator viewer, for using Android UI Automator library, I need to write my scripts in Java. And for using XUI test UI automation framework, I need to write my scripts in Objective-C or Swift. So for the same, let's say this addition test case, if I want to automate, so same script I am writing in C#, and then I am writing the same script in Java, and then I am writing it in Swift or Objective-C. So same a test, in order to perform that test on my 3 different applications, I'm writing the same test 3 times using 3 different UI automation libraries and using 3 different languages. That is where the Appium came here, right? So what Appium did, so the Selenium people, like the people who are familiar with the Selenium, they are already familiar with the terminologies like send keys. Let's say I want to type, so they are already familiar with send keys APIs. So for clicking, they are already familiar with click APIs and all, right? So what Appium did, that they extended the support of these Selenium APIs into the native context by introducing the drivers. So let's see now the architecture here. So our Selenium APIs, so these are the same APIs which we will use to write our Appium tests. The difference is the translations. So in Selenium Webdriver, the translations would be done by the respective browser drivers. Now here, the translation would be taken care of by respective platform drivers. Like for Android driver, iOS driver, and for Windows driver. Now instead of making people use the platform specific automation tools like UI Automator for Android and XUI test framework or iOS UI automation tool for iOS, what they have done is they created the drivers. Android driver will translate our same old Selenium API send keys into the respective frameworks API which is there for typing the text. So as these are also the UI automation frameworks like this UI Automator as well as iOS UI automation. These are all UI automation framework itself. So they have the APIs for identifying the elements as well as for performing different UI interactions. But instead of putting the automation testers into learning these automation libraries as well as learning the languages as well as writing the same test multiple times, Appium saved the efforts from the UI automation testers side. So they removed this the learning curve by writing the driver. So driver will take care of translating. You will just say send keys. If you want to say type, then you will just say send keys. But then that driver will translate that into the corresponding UI automation framework API, right? So Android driver will translate that send keys into the UI automator API which is there for typing. If I want to run the same statement now on iOS, so I will use iOS driver. So iOS driver will translate that send keys now into the iOS UI automation, corresponding iOS UI automation API call. That is how, by introducing these drivers, the Appium internally uses this platform UI automation tool itself, but it doesn't expose that automation tool to us. We don't feel like we are using it. We feel like we are using Selenium, but internally these UI automation frameworks are being used. Hence, whatever are the advantages of the of these automation tools become the advantages of the Appium. Whatever the disadvantages these these automation tools are suffering from Appium. Those disadvantages become the disadvantages of Appium. Whatever the requirements, whether the hardware software requirements which these UI automation frameworks need, those becomes the hardware software requirements and limitations for Appium as well, right? So Appium is completely bound by these automation tools. So internally these platform specific UI automation tools or libraries would be used, but for us, the automation testers, we are kind of using the Selenium only, right? So that's why it's very important here to understand the Appium here, right? The architecture of Appium here, right? So Selenium APIs would be sent to the Appium server running based on the session request, the initial session establishment request received from the script. The Appium server will start the required driver, Android driver, iOS driver, and the Selenium APIs would be sent to that respective driver for being translated, and those will get translated into the respective platform specific UI automation libraries, and those translated scripts would be sent to the mobile device. So on the mobile device you will have your application under test, but these translated scripts are required to be sent to one tool here, or you can say one server here, which is called as Bootstrap Agent. So what this Bootstrap Agent is responsible for? It is responsible for taking those translated scripts from the driver and perform those translated translated scripts, like the scripts which are translated into UI Automator API calls for Android, and iOS UI automation calls for iOS. So this Bootstrap agent is responsible for receiving those translated scripts and running it on the application under test. So on the devices you will get the application under test running, as well as one Bootstrap agent, which is a server program which sits on the device along with the application and receives the translated scripts from the driver after translation and runs it, right? So this is the end-to-end flow of our Appium test. So Appium test client library establishes a connection with the server. Based on that, server establishes the session with the requested driver, and then the APIs get transmitted to the driver for the sake of translation, and after translation they get sent to the Bootstrap agent running on the mobile, and that Bootstrap agent is responsible for performing or running those translated APIs in order to get our application under test worked on, right? So this is the end-to-end flow of our Appium test. So Appium is nothing but the Selenium's extension on the native context. For a web application, like if you want to automate the web application, say gmail.com or this particular website, but on the Android or iOS mobiles, you can use Selenium. You don't need to go for Appium in that case, because there the the web application doesn't runs on any OS platform. It runs ultimately inside the browser. So the required the browser drivers only you require to get them worked on, right? So Chrome driver, Gecko driver, right? So those drivers are only get used when you automate the websites on the mobile platforms. So Selenium can be used if you want to automate websites on the mobile platforms, because ultimately, as I said, websites run inside the browser. So if your website is running inside the Chrome browser, you would be communicating, or your Selenium APIs are going to be translated into Chrome UI automation API by your Chrome driver, the way it does when you run the test on the desktop environment, right? So it doesn't changes when it goes to the mobile environment. But the real point is native application automation, and Appium is responsible for extending the Selenium API support for automating native apps. So whether they are the Windows desktop apps or Android native apps or iOS native apps or even Mac based native apps. When it comes to the UI automation of native apps, Appium is responsible for extending the Selenium API support for automating these kinds of applications, right? Thank you guys.